still renting? My dad laughed across the dinner table, in front of everyone. I smiled quietly because the truth? He was paying me $47,000 a month. My name is Lily Anderson. I'm 30 years old, and in my family, success was something you had to show. Big house, luxury car, visible lifestyle. If people couldn't see it, it didn't count. And me? I didn't show much. I lived in a simple apartment, no flashy upgrades, no expensive displays, just quiet, intentional. And in my family, that meant one thing. You're still figuring things out, my father would say. Your cousin just bought a house, my mother would add. Comparison was constant, subtle sometimes, obvious most of the time. And I stopped responding to it years ago, because explaining my choices never changed anything. They only understood one language, visible success. So I stopped trying to translate mine. Then came Thanksgiving dinner. The whole family was there. Relatives, cousins, that one uncle who always asked uncomfortable questions. And of course, my parents, sitting at the center like they always did. Everything was going fine. Normal conversations. Small talk. Until it wasn't. So, Lily, my father said, leaning back slightly. That tone, I already knew. What are you up to these days? He asked. Working, I replied simply. What kind of work? My uncle jumped in. I gave my usual answer. I manage some projects. Vague, but accurate. And immediately, I saw it. That look. The one that says, that doesn't sound impressive. My father smiled slightly, then said it. So, still renting? A few people chuckled, not loudly, but enough. Enough to feel it. Enough to make the moment heavier than it should have been. I picked up my glass calmly, took a sip, didn't react, because this wasn't new. Nothing wrong with renting, my mother added quickly, but her tone didn't match her words. It never did. It's just, at your age, my father continued. You should be thinking about owning something. There it was, the real message. Not advice, judgment, wrapped in concern. I am, I said calmly. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Oh yeah? He asked. What kind of place? I looked at him, then around the table. Everyone was watching now, waiting, expecting. For once, I didn't give a vague answer. I already do, I said. A pause. Short, confused. You already do what? My uncle asked. Own property, I replied. Silence. Then a few small laughs, like I had made a joke, because in their minds, that didn't match the version of me they believed in. Sure, my father said lightly. Where is it? I leaned back slightly, calm, unbothered. Downtown, I said. Another pause, longer this time, because now they weren't sure how to react. Downtown? My cousin repeated. That's expensive, someone added. I nodded. It is. My father smiled again. But this time, it was tighter, less confident. And you own something there? He asked. Yes. How? He pressed. Simple question, but loaded. I met his gaze. By building something you never asked about, I said. Silence. Real silence this time. Because that answer didn't leave room for jokes or dismissal. What kind of property? He asked again. More serious now, less mocking. A building, I replied. No one laughed this time, because something had shifted. They weren't sure if I was serious, but they weren't sure I wasn't either. My mother looked at me carefully. Lily, what are you saying? She asked. I didn't rush, didn't dramatize it, just said it. I own the building you're living in. Silence. Complete. Total. Like the air had been pulled out of the room. My father stared at me, not laughing, not smiling, just processing. That's not funny, he said slowly. I'm not joking, I replied. My cousin looked at him. then back at me. Wait, what? She said. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, opened something, and turned it toward him. A payment record. Clear. Simple. $47,000. Monthly. From his account. To a company name. My company. This is your rent, I said quietly. No emotion. No anger. Just truth. And for the first time in my life, my father had nothing to say. Because the daughter he mocked for still renting was the one he had been paying every single month. And what happened next was something none of them were prepared for. For a moment, no one spoke. Not my father. Not my mother. Not even the relatives who always had something to say. The table was completely silent. My father stared at my phone, then at me, then back at the screen, like he was trying to find a mistake. This isn't possible, he said finally. It is, I replied calmly. My uncle leaned forward. Wait, are you serious? He asked. I didn't answer him. I kept my eyes on my father, because this moment wasn't about anyone else. You're telling me? My father said slowly. I've been paying rent. To you? Yes. Another silence, but this one was heavier. Because now it wasn't confusion. It was realization. How? He asked. The same question again. But this time, it meant something different. Not judgment. Understanding. I bought the building 2 years ago, I said. My mother's eyes widened slightly. 2 years? She repeated. I nodded. Yes. And you didn't tell us? She asked. There it was. That tone. Not concern. Not curiosity. But something else. Almost disbelief that I didn't share it. I tried to tell you about my projects, I said. You just weren't interested. Silent. Because that was true. Every time I mentioned work, they brushed it off. Every time I explained something, they changed the subject. Because it didn't sound impressive enough. At the time. So this whole time, my father said, you've been, what? Managing properties? Building them, I corrected. Another shift, because that word, building, carries weight. Different from working. Different from managing. It means ownership, control, vision. My cousin looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You own a whole building downtown? She asked. Yes. How many units? My uncle added. I answered simply, didn't exaggerate, didn't impress, just facts. And with every answer, the room changed. The energy, the perception, everything. Because now, they weren't looking at me the same way. Not the quiet daughter. Not the still figuring things out one. Something else. Something they understood. And that's when it hit me. Not them. Me. Nothing about me had changed. Not my work. Not my life. Not my success. The only thing that changed was what they could see. My father leaned back slowly, processing everything. Then he said something unexpected. Why didn't you just tell us clearly? I almost smiled, because that question answered itself. I did, I said. You didn't listen. Silence. Because now, there was no way around it. No way to deny it. My mother looked down for a moment, then back at me. We thought you were just doing small things, she admitted. I was, I said. They just added up. Another quiet moment. Then my father let out a slow breath. That's a lot to take in, he said. I nodded. I know. Because I had watched it happen slowly, step by step, while they weren't paying attention. And the rent? He asked. I raised an eyebrow slightly. What about it? You've been taking it? He said. There was something in his tone. Not anger. Not accusation. Just discomfort. Yes, I replied. It's a business. He nodded slowly. Of course it was. But for him, this wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. Because suddenly, the money he had been paying every month was going to someone he underestimated. His own daughter? My uncle let out a small laugh. Not mocking, more like disbelief. Well, that's one way to find out, he said. No one joined him. Because this wasn't funny. Not really. This was perspective shifting in real time. And it doesn't always feel comfortable. My mother looked at me again, softer this time. You could have told us, she said quietly. I held her gaze. I could have, I replied, but would it have mattered before tonight? She didn't answer, because she knew it wouldn't have. My father stayed quiet for a while, then finally said, we need to talk about this. There it was, the shift from mockery to seriousness, but I didn't rush to agree, because now the situation was different. Before, they had control. Now, they didn't. We can talk, I said. But not here. He nodded slowly, because even he understood this wasn't something you fix over dinner. Not in front of everyone. Not after everything that just happened. We finished the meal quietly. No more jokes. No more comments. Just thought. And when I stood up to leave, every eye followed me. But not the same way as before. Not with judgment. Not with dismissal. With something else. Respect. Curiosity. Maybe even a little regret. But what mattered most wasn't what they felt in that moment. It was what they would do next. Because realization is easy. Change? That's harder. And what happened after that dinner would prove whether they truly saw me now, or just reacted to what I had shown them. The next morning, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Messages, calls, notifications, all from the same people who had barely paid attention to me before. Lily, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? This is huge. I scrolled through them slowly, calm, detached, because I already understood something they didn't. They weren't reacting to me, they were reacting to what I owned. And those two things? They're not the same. I locked my phone and set it aside, because I wasn't interested in sudden attention. Not when it came with conditions. A few minutes later, my father called. I stared at his name for a second, then answered, "Hello?" His voice was different. No sarcasm, no confidence. Just careful. Lily, he said. I waited. We need to talk, he added. Same words as last night, but now there was weight behind them. We will, I replied calmly. When? He asked. Not today, I said. A pause. Why not? He asked. Because today was mine, not theirs. Because I have work, I replied. Silence. Then, right, he said quietly. That one word said everything. For years, my work didn't matter to him. Now, it did. We'll talk soon, I added. He agreed, quickly, because, for the first time, he wasn't in control of the timing. After the call, I opened my laptop. Meetings, contracts, decisions. My world didn't pause because of last night. And that's what made it real. Because this wasn't a reveal. This was my life, already in motion. By the afternoon, I got a message from my mother. Can we come see you? I read it twice, because that was new. Not come home. Not we need you. But can we come? A request, not a demand. I thought about it for a moment, then replied, tomorrow. Simple, clear. The next day, they arrived exactly on time. Not early, not late. That alone told me something. When I opened the door, they stood there quietly, looking different. Not in appearance, but in energy, less certain, more aware. Hi, my mother said softly. Hi, I replied. I stepped aside. Let them in. They walked in slowly, looking around, taking everything in. The space, the details, the life I had built. Without them, this is yours? My father asked. Yes, he nodded slowly, like he was putting pieces together. The version of me he believed in, and the reality in front of him We sat down. No small talk. No pretending. Because this wasn't that kind of meeting. My father spoke first. "What happened last night?" he started. I didn't interrupt. I let him find the words. "We didn't know," he said. I nodded. "I know." My mother looked at me. "But we should have," she added. That was closer to the truth, because it wasn't about information. It was about attention, about listening, about caring enough to understand. "We didn't take you seriously," my father admitted. There it was. Clear, honest, and late, but still, real. "I noticed," I said calmly. No anger, no edge, just fact. Silence settled for a moment. Then my mother spoke again. "Why didn't you ever show us?" she asked. I leaned back slightly, thinking, "Because I didn't want to be valued for it," I said. I wanted to be valued without it. They didn't respond immediately, because that idea was new to them, uncomfortable, different. "We thought you were behind," my father said. "I wasn't," I replied. "We see that now," he added quickly. And I believed him, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Less pride, more realization. "But that's not the only problem," I said. They both looked at me. "What do you mean?" my mother asked. I held their gaze. "You didn't just misunderstand me," I said. "You judged me." Silence. Because that word hits differently. "We didn't mean to," my father said. "I know," I replied. "But you did." Another pause. Then my mother's voice softened. "We're sorry." Simple. Direct. No excuse. And that mattered. Because apologies don't need explanations. They need honesty. "I accept that," I said. And I meant it. But acceptance doesn't erase everything. They seem to understand that. "What do we do now?" my father asked. A real question. Not controlling, not leading. Just asking. And for the first time, I had the answer. "We move forward," I said. But not the way things were before. They both nodded immediately. "Of course," my mother said. "No assumptions," I continued. "No comparisons." "Agreed," my father said. "And no respect based on what I have," I added. "Only who I am." That one mattered most. They were quiet for a second. Then my mother said softly, "We understand." And for the first time, it sounded like they actually did. But even then, I knew something important. Understanding a moment is easy. Changing a pattern? That takes time. And what happened next would show me whether this was just a reaction or something real. After that conversation, I didn't expect everything to change overnight. And it didn't. But something subtle shifted. The pressure was gone. Not completely, but enough to notice. My parents didn't suddenly become perfect. They didn't call every day, didn't act overly emotional. Instead, they did something different. They were careful. Careful with their words. Careful with their tone. Careful with me. And that mattered. Because before, they never were. A few days later, my mother called. Not to ask about the building. Not about money. Just, "How are you?" Simple. Normal. But new. "I'm good," I said. And for the first time, she didn't follow it with advice. Or comparison. Or concern that felt like pressure. She just listened. That alone felt like progress. My father changed too. Not in big speeches. Not in dramatic apologies. But in small moments. One evening, he sent me a message. "I've been reading about property development." I stared at it for a second. Because that wasn't something he would have done before. "What made you interested?" I asked. A short pause. Then, "You." That word carried more weight than he probably realized. Because it meant he was trying to understand my world. Not reshape it. Not judge it. Just understand. Weeks passed. And slowly, our conversations became easier. More natural. Because now, there was something that hadn't been there before. Respect. Not forced, not performative. Real. One afternoon, we met again. This time, no tension, no heavy topics. Just coffee, normal conversation. And at one point, my father said something that caught me off guard. "I told one of my friends about you," he said. I raised an eyebrow slightly. "Oh?" He was asking about investments, my father added. And I said, "My daughter actually does this." I didn't respond immediately, because that moment was bigger than it sounded. Not because he mentioned me, but because of how, not as someone figuring things out, not as someone behind, but as someone he respected. "That's new," I said lightly. He gave a small smile. "Yes, it is." No defensiveness, no denial, just acknowledgement. And that told me more than anything else. My mother smiled softly. "We're proud of you," she said. Those words, I had heard them before, but they always came with something. A condition, a comparison, a reason. This time, they didn't. I looked at her, then at my father. And for the first time, I believed it. Because now, it wasn't about what I proved. It was about what they finally saw. But even then, I kept something clear in my mind. This wasn't about fixing the past. It was about building something different, something healthier, something honest. And that requires boundaries, not just forgiveness. So when my father casually said, "You should think about expanding, maybe something bigger," I didn't just nod like before. "I already am," I said calmly. "But I'll do it my way." He paused, then nodded. "Of course." No push, no correction. And that small moment, that was real change. Because before, he wouldn't have stopped. Now, he did. Weeks turned into months. And slowly, the dynamic shifted completely. No more jokes about renting. No more subtle comparisons. No more quiet judgment. Just respect. And something else. Curiosity. Because now, they wanted to understand me, not define me. And that difference, it changes everything. But even then, there was one final moment that made everything clear. A moment that showed me this wasn't temporary. This was real. And it happened in the most unexpected way. Months passed. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt stable. Not just my work, not just my life, but my relationship with my parents too. Not perfect, but real. And that mattered more. One evening, my father invited me to dinner. Just us. No big family gathering. No audience. I agreed. When I arrived, everything felt different from that Thanksgiving night. Same house, same table, but a completely different energy. No tension, no expectations, just quiet. We sat down, started eating, talking about normal things. Work, life, nothing heavy. And then, halfway through dinner, my father looked at me and said, "I need to say something." I paused.